to this For Your Consideration video. My name is Guy, and today I'm answering a question which has been asked for the last 2 years. Is there a way to tell our wonderful story from the perspective of the good guys? So in other words, that wonderful sentence, someone wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it, is there a way that instead of making it the evil villain that we use as our basis for the narrative, is making it a good character? So perhaps a good king wants to protect his kingdom badly and is having difficulty getting it because there's a giant villain who's got a plan and a plot and should be the center of the story. I mean, no. No. Is there a good king who wants something just and honorable, where there isn't a central evil force acting against them, that doesn't have a concerted effort against them? Is that a way to tell a story? Now, traditional Hollywood and script writing rules and things that come from that will all emphatically state that you should have it as the hero's journey in that sentence. So the party wants to overcome an evil sorcerer, but can't do it because he has more power than they do. That's the kind of narrative that you're looking for, as far as Hollywood script writing is concerned. So absolutely, you can start with a good story and then work it out from there. But there's some fundamental changes to the entire thought process that this channel is basically based upon in order to look at it from the good guys having something going on. And the way that we need to change that is, and I've got my notes just below the camera, so excuse me for looking down, but the difference is that we need the players to buy into the story. With the villain being the center of that narrative and the villain then enacting their plan, they start to affect the players' characters adversely. So the players have buy-in to defend their character. Their character is the one that's being attacked, so they're going to push back. In the case where the character is the motivator of the story, or a good king is the motivator of the story, there isn't that sense of personal engagement that necessarily follows when the bad guy is attacking the player's characters. So you need to get player buy-in. And a great example of this is, in my opinion, a story like King Arthur and Excalibur, the story after he's become King Arthur. There isn't necessarily a unified evil, all right? There is in the case of Mordred and Morgana. But the players' characters, Sir Lancelot, Sir Gawain, etc., they don't know that she's there. They're not really acting against the knights, they're acting against Arthur. So the knights have this quest: find the Holy Grail, restore hope to Britain. And they go off on their various quests, and they encounter all sorts of weird and wonderful stories. And if you read the full exploits, there's amazing things that happen to these poor knights. But they remain dedicated to getting that grail. You have to make sure that your players buy into the idea that their characters are going to remain dedicated to getting the end goal, because the characters might not necessarily follow through. The players might get bored and they might wander off. If you're using a character as the goal, as the motivator, the characters want to go off and do shopping, they want to go off and slay a dragon in the hills, they want to go off and do that, that's absolutely fine, but that's not going to give you a long-term campaign. That's going to give you a series of adventures which are short enough that the players and their characters should remain engaged until they get to their goal. So when we're talking long-term plans, you must make sure that they get buy-in. Now, when it comes to modules, this is where they have a certain advantage. Players coming together to play in a module have as a goal to get to the end of the module. So the investment is already there. My character is not going to deviate too much from the module because I know that, well, it's a module and we want to get to the end. So when the GM says you're on a plane flying over Borneo, your character doesn't suddenly go, oh, I grab my parachute and I jump out. Or I run to the cockpit, point my revolver at the pilots, take control of the plane and fly to Acapulco. They're not going to do that because they have invested in playing through the modules. So there is that investment that I'm talking about. So you need to get that first before you start to use the idea of a good force that has to be achieved by the characters throughout a trial and tribulation effect, because that's what starts to happen. If the characters want to get X, they're going to suffer difficulties in getting there. You need to make sure that the difficulties don't suddenly get to the point where they go, you know what, stuff it, I'm out of this, I don't need a grail, he screwed her, he got angry at him, and the whole country is just stuffed. I'm going to let Morgana take over, because Mordred makes a much better king. He's decisive. He doesn't mind sleeping with his mother, or with his sister, for that matter. So, you know what? Let's go that route. So you need that buy-in. Now, something else that you also need to do is the heroes obviously have to want whatever it is that they're after. That's very important. Now, the adversity that they face, the difficulty that they face, because fundamentally we are not having a giant big bad villain who is acting against the players. We're not doing that. We have a good story here where the good are the instigators of this adventure. The evil characters don't know that they're coming. They haven't got a clue, right? What that means is that your foes, your villains, change. You no longer have this nemesis character who's actively working against the party throughout the duration of it, because they would have their own plans, and their plans would start to change and react as necessary, and that would precipitate the story being from the villain's perspective. What you do have, however, is that you've now opened up opportunities for non-personal villains to come into play. Remember, the goal is the object or the activity that the players' characters have chosen to buy into. So that means you can start to introduce nature as an adversary. You can do this, of course, in the evil campaign, but in the evil campaign, unless the evil being has the ability to control natural environments, the weather and that sort of thing, they're not going to be able to use that in their arsenal against the players. A good GM will use it anyway, but they'll just sort of, it's not intentional from the side of the villain. In a good story, nature can become a major adversary. The Stygian swamps that bog down the boots of the characters as they try and get from point A to point B. That becomes that episode, that adventure's adversary. That becomes the difficulty that they have to overcome in order to get out. So when you're watching some kind of TV show where there isn't a single entity that's working against them, it's just a whole bunch of stuff, but their end goal is good. And a classic example of this is Star Trek Voyager. There isn't a single evil character that actively thwarts them and that works against them. There are lots of villains that come into the show, absolutely. But there may be 1 or 2 episodes. Maybe if they're lucky, they'll have 5 or 6 episodes, but that's it. The crew have to struggle through all kinds of things. Natural phenomenon being one of them. So you can now use this a lot more in terms of this story, because if the players' characters are dedicated to getting that grail, they have to fight through the swamps. So the swamps now become a lot more menacing, perhaps, than in a normal or a more traditional way. The situations now become more interesting for you to create, because they're not situations that have been created with malice or with evil intent. They're just situations that have arisen. What this type of drama is, because that's what it really is, this kind of emergent drama is often created by the characters themselves because they don't reveal information, or they reveal too much information. So you start to get a lot more interpersonal things happening. Again, this will happen in an evil campaign. And by evil campaign, I mean we refer to the evil character as someone who wants something badly and has something to do with it. These will happen there, and you should have them happening there if this is part of your arsenal of storytelling. What I'm saying is, in a good campaign, there is no single entity that's acting against the players, so you can now focus more on these kinds of things. And of course then chance, which doesn't exist in a role-playing world. There is literally no such thing as chance in a role-playing space. It's a dice which determines a specific thing. There's just no way to simulate random chance. It's a table, that means it's a fixed value. Yes, it's random on which table and where, but it's still fixed, right? Chance is something that you as the storyteller now will use against the players. So their characters chance upon this, or they just miss the train because it's 5 minutes early, or it's 3 minutes early, or it's whatever. Now that starts to become a major adversary for the characters. as you again thwart them and stop them and keep them from their goal. So you've got all of these other weapons, which yes, we have for the other group, but for this group they can be a little bit more focused, a little bit more specific, and they become your villains. The environment, chance, the situation the characters find themselves in, and of course then you would throw in villains and henchmen. You'd have them coming and attacking the party, but it would be for very specific reasons that deal specifically with where the party is at that moment, and those villains and things generally won't follow along with them. Once you've moved through the Orc Chieftain's territory, he lets you go and he doesn't care about you ever again. So that's something to bear in mind. Something else to bear in mind is because the quest is not derived out of personal revenge, personal investment from the characters because they were attacked by the main villain, but because they are doing something that they believe in, some kind of quest for honor, for justice, for restoration of the kingdom, because at the core it relies on the player's characters to buy into the concept. You have to make sure that although you are pushing back with everything that you've got, you're pushing back with encounters, you're pushing back with nature, you're pushing back with situations, you're pushing back with all of that stuff, that you don't push back too much. Remember, if the adversity is too great, if the player characters get to the point where they're like, you know what, this is a lot of effort and we're not making any headway, we're not moving forward, you don't have the prodding tool that you have with the master villain plot, because the master villain plot will continue regardless of what the characters are doing. So when the characters go, oh, I'm not going to do it, I'm just not doing it anymore, I give up, the villain blows up a planet which they happen to have NPCs on, or which they were about to, it will goad them back into the narrative. With a good story where the player's characters are on this quest, if they stop, that's where the quest stops. So the challenge is you need to give them breadcrumbs. You need to give them micro victories on this path. Again, what that means is that your planning for your narrative now changes. Instead of punctuating moments where the villain achieves their goals and gets things into place and accommodates for the characters disrupting that, you now have to have a place where you are giving these micro victories to your characters and to your players so that they will continue to follow along regardless of the adversity. What do I mean by micro victories or micro goals and things? Well, in the quest for the Holy Grail, let's say that the first adventure is them being issued the quest and the fact that they need to start looking in a certain direction. They get told that there's a librarian who may or may not have an ancient map of the old world which could indicate where the Grail was last known to be, or was in its last existence. So now they're going to go on that quest. They're going to go and try and find that box, find that location, or in this case, find the librarian. They get to the library, but you've got to make it difficult. The arch-librarian actually turns out to be a vampire who, because of circumstance, situation, and chance, all of those new powers that you now have at your command, they are now going to try and eat the party as the party now goes through the library. The party manages to defeat the vampire and they get the map. They think this is wonderful. They've now moved on to the next step. The next step, however, you have decided is a natural phenomenon, and it's going to be a snowstorm in the mountains where they are heading to the original abbey where the Grail was supposedly hidden. They start on this journey, but nature is simply too strong. They didn't pack enough, they didn't plan enough, and they can't get to the abbey. The abbey gets snowed in and is lost forever. They don't seem to have any way to get forward, to move forward. The breadcrumb could be an NPC mentor or a guide who helps give them advice where else they could look. I actually remember that abbey was burned to the ground about 100 years beforehand, but the abbot and his people escaped before it was burnt to the ground. They escaped to over there. You've thrown a breadcrumb for the players to start following again. So you must make sure that you are motivating those players to continue their search, to continue their journey, even if they stuff it up, even if they get to a point where they don't feel that there is a direction anymore. They've exhausted all options and they're now lost. In an evil campaign, you can have the villain doing something which causes something that gives them a direction to go in. In a good campaign, because they're motivating the journey, because the characters are motivating the journey, when the characters come to a dead end, the journey comes to a dead end. You've got to build in ways and means in which you can overcome that. And so a guide or a mentor or something that will prompt them in a new direction has to be there. Subtlety, of course, is the key. If the mentor is just sitting there going, well, now you should go there, and then you should go there, and then you should go there, and then you should go there, why are they playing the game? They're not discovering stuff on their own. So then that can become equally as disillusioning as just handing them the story on the plate. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I'm going, I've done that. Okay, done. Well, there we go. So, in summation, which I probably should have done 15 minutes ago, in summation, the good narrative is absolutely viable, except the pressure is on you in order to motivate the story moving forward. When the characters stop, the story stops. There isn't an instigating force that's going to keep it going, unlike the evil campaign. So you have to bear that in mind when you are doing your narrative. You also have to bear in mind that the players need motivation. They need small victories. They're not going to be goaded into doing this mission. They're doing this mission because they chose to do it. That's a very different way of handling the psychology of players in your game. So bear that in mind as well. Until next time, I wish you a fabulous weekend. As you can see, summer has started to arrive in Japan, and I am starting to do my usual trick in summer, which has now completely changed because I'm in the opposite hemisphere. But that's wonderful. It's lovely. It's fantastic. Hit the like button if you like the video. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of these kind of videos where we unpack different styles, different ways of telling the narrative. Because there are a few other ways that come to mind, but they're not necessarily as straightforward as the one that I've put forward in the basic idea of this entire channel. But I am happy to explore other ways of telling stories, because I know that there are many, many, many other ways of telling stories. And one of those, of course, is that the characters make the story and the GM just facilitates. That requires a lot of skill and talent on the GM's behalf, because you don't know where it's going. So maybe that's a video that we should look at. If you agree, well, subscribe and then comment below saying, yes, I agree, and I subscribed. And if you don't subscribe, just say, yes, I agree. Either way, your choice. Until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest